I'm Daniel. I'm a Cubs fan.
And I'm Andy, and I'm a Sox fan.
And this is a podcast divided after the intro.
Your Daily Cubs White Sox podcast, the best place for all the baseball debate you need.
And welcome everybody back to a podcast divided. Today we're going to be talking about the Cubs and White Sox divisions and seeing how they'll amount to, what they'll amount to. So let's just hop right into it. So, Andy, for the Cubs, obviously a division that is, both of these teams, both of these centrals are very bad, obviously. But, I don't know which one you'd argue is worse or better. But I do know that they're both pretty bad and they're both winnable if you were half decent. And the Cubs have a chance just because of how bad it was, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know that. Okay, so I would honestly say that the Cubs division is worse as of right now, just because of the unpredictability of these teams that could win the division. Like the Brewers, will they keep winning or will they fall off? Cardinals, Reds.
Yeah, last year was a flop.
Yeah, and even the Cubs, who knows if they'll do good? I do. They won't.
Yeah, exactly.
I do. They will not do any good. But basically,
that's opinion.
All of these teams can win the division for the NL Central. However, in the AL Central, there's really two teams that come out on top here, and those would be the Twins and the Guardians. The White Sox, they're just a giant question mark. I doubt that they're going to do anything special. The Royals, they're up and coming, honestly. I can see them maybe doing maybe turning some heads. Same with the Tigers. So honestly, I think that the Royals and the Tigers will be up and coming soon. I think this will be the year that they are gonna stop being bad and start maybe even approaching 500 or over 500 record. While the Guardians and the Twins are probably going to be the two teams that will compete for the playoff. Or not the division win. So we have teams that really in the AL Central have a path to follow. Well, all five teams in the NL Central have no path. They don't know where they're going this year. They don't know if they're going to be in the playoffs. They don't know if they're going to even reach 500. Some of them. So really, it's all just who knows.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of the same for the NL Central. And like you said, the unpredictability levels are insane. Like, you think about the Reds, I believe they haven't even, really done anything this offseason. I haven't heard anything, at least. Relevant, at least. And last year, they were, a wild card team that didn't make the wild card. But they were solid, like the Cubs, in the sense of, they hovered around 500. They competed for that wild card. It's pretty easy to obtain in the NL, especially. And, the Cubs, they could win this division or they could be fourth. I think they're definitely going to be ahead of the Pirates. And besides that, it's just speculation that, the Brewers, a lot of people are talking, and I think the same way in a sense about how the Brewers, lost count. And that's going to have an impact, but they haven't actually traded Burns yet, and they haven't actually made too many moves where it's where they're not going to win. Obviously, that Hader move a few years ago was a really big one, but
that was weird.
So we know that their organization is preparing to rebuild, and with the council move, but there's no.
Daniel, I think you cut off.
Hello? Okay, I'm back. So, anyways,
what happened?
I accidentally got muted. So, anyways, the Brewers are. I'll cut that out. So, anyways, the Brewers are a team that really, have been in the direction of not contending from an organizational perspective for the last few years. Like that Hader trade started it all, really. And you think about the direction they're headed in, it's pretty obvious that they're headed towards a rebuild. However, they've yet to trade for Corbin Burns. And so they're still going to have him at least till the deadline. And, they're still a team that will compete with the Cubs. I believe that. I don't think the Cubs are out of the Brewers league. But the Brewers are still having a chance to not even be that good either. I mean, they're on the way down, and then last year they weren't even too much better than the Cubs, like 3 games or something. That's an easy division to win. And then you also think about the Reds, and they're a team that the Reds are a team that really did not perform like I was saying, but they've got potential. And then you also think about the Cardinals and them making a lot of moves. Like last year they were supposed to be good, but they had a lot of underperformance. Like Contreras did worse than Miguel Amaya. And the Cardinals ended up underperforming definitely last year. But that doesn't mean that they won't that doesn't mean that they will underperform this year. Is what I'm trying to say. And all these pitcher acquisitions, like they might actually help out the Cardinals to the point where they might win at least 80 games next year and maybe even more. But Lance Lynn is not that big of a player, honestly.
What?
His stats are very
Lance Lynn's the best.
He's pretty washed, and he has probably gonna have like a 4 or 5 ERA.
Okay, maybe like a sub 3, but not a 5 probably.
Maybe 4. Maybe 3.
4
not lower than
4.5 at worst.
Now, a guy who's more intriguing is definitely Kyle Gibson. In my opinion, he's a lot better than Lance Lynn. But
I like Sonny Gray for the Cardinals very much.
Yeah, I didn't even mention him. Yeah. Those are 3 pitchers they signed. Just like, wow. Their rotation is going to be pretty solid, actually.
Yeah, that's been a hole for the Cardinals for so long. And now it's finally really getting a foundation. So, you know what? Maybe the Cardinals will rebound. I honestly hope they do because I like them because because the Cubs hate them. Basically, that's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see that like the Cardinals are trying to compete unlike the Brewers. So direction-wise, I see the Cardinals competing in the future and the Brewers dropping out of it in the next couple of years. So, but in next year, I think the Brewers are still kind of scary. So, I mean, and like I talked about the Pirates, like there's no way that they're better than the Cubs. I mean, they're in a bad spot right now,
I mean, they're an up-and-coming team.
Yeah, I mean, you've got O'Neal Cruz, but
They got injured mid-season.
I mean, there's no way the Cubs don't get second place in this division. Like, come on.
Well, I mean, about 3 weeks before the playoffs, you said there's no way the Cubs don't make the playoffs, and look what happened.
That's like think about it this way, right? Like the 92% chance. Well, there's always a chance that doesn't happen, but the odds were good, and I mean, we're probably going to be better than the Reds because we've been making more moves than the Reds.
I don't know.
I mean, the Reds haven't been making any moves,
They got
especially if we sign Bellinger, then we're gonna be the same team and better.
That's certainly not set in stone.
Well, I mean, at least on paper.
On paper?
Yeah, on paper.
What's on paper?
Like,
if he does sign with the Cubs, they'll be better. But
On paper, we're gonna have the same roster plus Imanaga plus Michael Bush. So we're gonna have some improvements in the same roster, except for Stroman. I know you've told me about Stroman, but like, come on, no one really cares. Stroman was good for the first half, but he's not. That was a lucky thing, and then he was horrible.
oh, now that he's not on the Cubs, it's a lucky thing. Okay.
Well, I mean, he completely collapsed after that. He had like a 9 ERA in June or July. Like,
Because he was injured. He can't play when he's injured.
so he failed us.
Okay, so that's his fault for being injured. Okay, my bad. I'll take that into
even if he was
consideration next time.
injured, you can't say that he had a big influence on last year's team when he pitched some
Yeah.
games before he actually like left on the injured list and negatively affected us.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're injured. Okay, that's what happened to Joe Burrow on the Bengals, and you know what? That team's not in the playoffs. He wasn't the same, and then he got injured. So yeah, but you know what? The fans still love him. He's still signed to that big contract. He's not leaving. He's not leaving Cincinnati. So I think that you're just a little bit salty about Stroman leaving.
You have to understand, Stroman is not the guy you want because he has a lot of concerns. He hasn't been solid for the Cubs since he signed. Like, I'm gonna pull up his stats right now, but
Okay.
we definitely were expecting a lot more from him because I remember when the Cubs were playing like before Stroman signed with the Cubs, and we were playing against the Mets, and we were like, oh, thankfully the Cubs didn't have to face Marcus Stroman this season. I mean, this series, because that would have been a tough game to win. And then he comes to the Cubs and it's like, this is gonna be good. Now is that the first game he ever pitched with the Cubs, and obviously it started off with him pitching really good, and then Ross taking him out early, and then Chavez, and then we choked it, and then
Choked it. Okay.
and we ended up like and he like not having that many good games with him. Like, sure, he had some good times, but like you look at his career ERA 3.65, solid, but you look at his Cubs ERA and it's not very good.
What is it?
And
366.
I'm actually a little bit surprised. 3.96 and then 4.48. Like, and
That's
come on.
actually not good at
Also,
all.
you're talking about him like he was hurt the whole year last year. He's only had 2 seasons in his whole career.
Yeah,
of
you know
10
what? I'm
years.
gonna redact what I say. That's not a good ERA. That doesn't help your team in the slightest.
He's played
But
10 years, and he's only had 2 years with more innings pitched than last year. 4.48 ERA last year. Before that, 3.96. But honestly, I don't know why people talked about him like he was so good. He's only had 1 sub-3 ERA, and it was sub-2 in 2015.
that's pretty good ERA. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not a good thing that. Well, I mean, it's not bad that you got rid of him, honestly. But who are you gonna replace with him? Like, I guess Imanaga, but
Imanaga. We have Wisniewski. I'd take Wisniewski over Stroman, honestly.
well, me too, because he's Polish. But you know what?
But here's the thing. I just realized, Marcus Stroman was overhyped when he signed with the Cubs. I'm realizing that now.
Because you overhyped him.
I mean, people were all talking about the Stro show. I'm looking at his stats before he signed with the Cubs. A 598, 361, 407, 352, the 4 years before he signed with the Cubs, like, and then he was even worse with the Cubs. Like, I thought we were getting a really good guy, but I think
Maybe you should check the stats next time.
Yeah, I think the Cubs media kind of overhyped him.
Only a little.
This was before Locked On Cubs, by the way. So.
Well, you gotta understand that the contract itself overhyped him. I mean, what was it, like $20 million or something? It was something stupid. I know that.
I think it was definitely more than he signed with the Yankees, but it was also really short. But about the White Sox division, it's kind of in the same spot like the Cubs division, but there are definitely some differences because
For sure. And the main difference I would say is predictability. I would say that you can easily predict the projections of all five of the teams more than you can predict one of these NL Central teams.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised, honestly, looking at these standings because, like, I mean, I didn't really follow Cleveland that much last year, but I remembered in 2022 they had that like playoff game against the Yankees when remember
Yeah, I remember.
the rocking the baby celebration. Remember after the home run, then they still lost. Yeah,
Yeah, classic Cleveland choking playoff series is.
but yeah, exactly. But I don't know why they and only had 76 wins last year, and then Detroit 78, and Minnesota was really solid at 87. Yeah, Minnesota I remember from last year,
Yeah,
but
Minnesota's projected to win the division next year. And
But definitely comparing the Cubs and White Sox divisions, the Cubs division is definitely better because I'm looking at, but predictability wise, because you look at last year, 92 wins for the Brewers in first place. Minnesota had 87. Second place, Detroit at 78, and then third place 76. It was 83 and 82 for second and third place in the NL Central, and then the worst two teams in the NL Central were 76 and 71, and in the AL Central is 61 and 56. So you know it's definitely a little bit worse, but they're also really close. And if you say who are the two worst divisions, they're definitely the two Centrals. So
yeah, no
we're
doubt.
blessed. We're blessed that we have such bad divisions because if we
But
were in
we
the
can't do anything about that. We are only making the divisions worse.
but if we were in the NL East, for example, that would be fun, huh?
No, it wouldn't. We both accumulate 100 losses.
Yeah, because we have to play the Dodgers more.
Dodgers, Phillies, Braves.
Ah,
Crazy.
yeah. You know, it's interesting looking at these divisions because like they're so bad compared to the rest of the MLB.
I
Like
know. Well,
in the
I'm
yeah
sure that in like 5 or 6 years, it's going to be flip flop. You know, the Reds and the Pirates are going to be like competing for the top spot, and they're both going to get like 90 wins. And then same with like the Royals and the Tigers, they're going to be competing for the top spot. They're both going to get like 95 wins consistently.
well, I mean things do change with an organization that makes smart moves, but I think that the
Or dumb
Cubs and
ones,
White
just like in
Sox
the Mets.
the White Cubs and White Sox have potential to, but like the White Sox are still have to do their rebuild. But once you rebuild, if it's successful, I mean the Cubs are in a spot where like what they did in 2016 that unraveled because of bad performances, and then they had to make the trades. Like you have to keep developing prospects, in my opinion, because you think about all those guys who are on the Cubs that made them win the World Series. I mean, almost all of them were like they were all prospects until like Lester and Ross. Those were signings, and
Yeah.
you think about like all these
When
guys who
you're
they
a team, you're
drafted,
ready to win. You want to sign players.
but that's what ended up making the Cubs become a bad team again. But it also led them to a World Series. So
In my opinion, I think Hayward led them to being a bad team, which is again another big signing.
I mean, big signings are so risky, but
They are, but when you're a good team, it's almost like you're forced to overpay no matter what. Like you want the best player in the race.
yeah, and then everyone starts underperforming, and then you have to be in a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine the Dodgers like first round exit or something.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't even know at this point. Like the MLB is just like very confusing to like project stuff because like there's what you think will happen and there's what you know will happen, especially with the playoffs. But even in the regular season, like no one saw the Cubs coming last year, and then this year, I'm not really sure what the perception is going to be, but I know this year they're probably going to have at least a little more pressure to do good because last year they were competing and they for the division at least in the wild card, and we were ahead of the Diamondbacks. I like to say this a lot because it's true. But we were ahead of the Diamondbacks for almost the whole time in the stretch when we started when we got in the playoff spot and we were in the that really good stretch. We were ahead of them for 2 months probably or something, 2 or 3ish, or we were in a good spot. And I remember saying that I wish we could get the third wild card spot just because we get to play the second. We get to play the Oh no, you get to play the third division winner, and you're the second one would have to play
Yeah.
the Phillies. And I didn't want to play the Phillies, but the point is that they won one more game than us. They won 84 games, and they made it to the World Series. And I will not I will not stop stressing the fact that the Cubs could have made the World Series in the same way last year if they just got hot at the right time. And Jed was actually smart at the trade deadline and signed and got us some relievers because
Yeah,
he
instead he had to settle with Jeimer Candelario.
and he was a good acquisition because he filled the third base hole, but Jed ignored relievers completely.
Yeah, and
That's why we
that
collapsed.
was by far your biggest weak spot before the deadline.
Yeah, and we didn't fill it. And when the bullpen collapsed, that's when the team collapsed because we were getting the lead. You think about that Braves game with Suzuki, that never would have even happened if we didn't choke a 6-1 lead. I believe it was 5-1, 6-1 or something.
I think it was 6-0 actually. I'm pretty sure 6-0.
Yeah, 6-0, 6-1. We have this big lead against one of the best teams in baseball, and we're cruising, it seems. And then because against a team like the Braves, if you're ahead, you have to keep it until the end and win because you're not going to win every game. But the games that you do get a good lead like that, you can't lose those if you want to maybe make it to the World Series. Because in the playoffs, if you have, for example, 3 games where you get a lead early in a 5-game series, you have to win all 3 of those games if you want to keep going.
Yeah.
But that's hard. Sometimes you have to come back, but also if you get a lead, you've got to keep it. And that's what the bullpen does. And over the course of the season, Ross had to use the bullpen too much, and that's not his fault. It's the fault of Jed, who didn't get us enough relievers, and then that ended up happening. But
that
the collapse, but
the collapse.
But I just think about, I'm kind of sad when I think about last year's Cubs because I think about this year. It takes so much work to get to the position we were in last year, where we were a 92% chance to make the playoffs. We were in that number 2 spot with 2 weeks left. That's what you play for, and then you just end up choking it all just because Jed couldn't find the reliever on the cheap enough deal. I don't know what it was, but it's not satisfying as a fan to see your front office fail like that, in the sense of you wanna fill your holes, and then there's a big hole that ends up making you lose the season. And
Yeah, I mean, if we remember correctly, people were saying, are the Cubs going to even buy at the trade deadline, or are they going to sell? So obviously the answer was that they're going to buy, but they're going to buy really conservatively, and maybe they didn't find any deals for relievers that were super conservative, and the Cubs didn't have to give up anyone.
Yeah, that would actually make sense. That would make sense. He was looking for really cheap deals, and that's why he got Candelario. But if you're gonna buy, you have to get relievers, because if you're gonna go for it, the only way you get to the playoffs and keep winning is if you have a bullpen that's healthy, and that healthiness comes from rest, and that rest comes from depth. So, and Jed got none of that.
Okay,
Jed got none of that.
Who was the best first baseman in the National League besides Freddie Freeman?
Why do I feel like saying Alonso? He had almost 40 or 50 home runs, but
how about Matt Olson?
Oh, Matt Olson, he was good.
Did you know that he played all 162 games last season?
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there were so many relievers that the Cubs could have signed at the deadline. They didn't, but
I mean, there are also so many relievers that the Cubs could have gotten in free agency, but they didn't.
Well, so far, but you have to believe that we're going to be more aggressive now. Although you could also argue that it would have been smarter to be aggressive at last year's deadline than now, but
Or at the beginning of free agency, or at the winter meetings. Why does it have to be now?
because people don't want to sign this that early in the market. Like they wanted to wait for the big guys like Otani and Hader. Otani set the whole free agent market, and
Oh
then
yeah,
Hader
he did. He pretty much ruined all of free agency now that everyone's getting way overpaid.
More set the reliever market. But like that really shows that like um it's it people guys don't want to sign until like it's like the right time, and a lot of people were waiting for the big guys to drop first, and that makes sense. I talked about this yesterday, but you left already, so I'm gonna try to find the thing that I was gonna tell you. But um one thing I will say is that yeah, I found it. But one thing I will say is that the teams in the Cubs division, two of them actually, or three of them have potential to that they'll probably. What I mean is like they'll probably compete with the Cubs, and I don't know if they'll actually be better, but the Cubs are definitely going to be competing with them because they all have potential to fail like the Cardinals did last year. But honestly, the Reds are the team. The Reds might be worse than the Cardinals next year.
No,
I'm thinking
I don't
it
think
might
so. Unless the Cardinals pop off, I think the Reds are going to do great.
I mean, I see the reason why you'd like the Reds, but also they're not really being aggressive in the off season. They're kind of, I don't know, they're not really doing it for me.
Yeah,
They kind of
well,
always seem like they always seemed like a joke to me last year. Like when we played Milwaukee, it was like, okay, we gotta be on our A game. When it was the Reds, it was like, yes, they're technically really close to us in the wild card, but they have nothing on us.
remember when they walked off against you?
Oh yeah, the I'm done game.
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen that, it's the most hilarious moment at around I think 30 minutes. In the Cubs Reds watch party that we had. Go check that out. It is the most hilarious thing that has ever happened on this podcast.
And then the next day, they also walked off too.
Yeah, Cubs choked another.
Yeah, don't remind me, Andy. Also, here's the thing I said yesterday. So, the top 50 from the lists of the top 50 free agents unsigned. These are dates: January 18th, 23, January 18th, 24. 23, the three players who were still available from the top 50 list were Profar, Chafin, and Waka. This year, Bellinger, Snell, Montgomery, Matt Chapman, Hader, Soler. Now, this is from 2 days ago, granted. J.D. Martinez.
It hasn't changed much.
Hoskins, Stevenson, Clevenger, Aroldis Chapman, Lorenzen, Urshela, Rosario, Merrifield, Turner, Belt, Neris, Junis, Hendricks, Tim Anderson, and more. There's still more that they just didn't include on here. They said, but the point is that this is a slow free agency, and that's why it's not like the Cubs are the only team that's not like being quick. Everyone's just taking a while to make their signings, so it's not like the Cubs are being slower. It's just that last year we got used to such a fast-paced offseason, and this year we're not getting that, and so that's why it feels slow. But that's what happens, You get three A's on tests in a row when you're used to B's, and then you're not happy when you get a B.
Yeah.
Something that effective, like getting used to what just happened, and it's not like the Cubs are being worse than the other teams in free agency, although the Dodgers have been more aggressive, but that's because they have more money. And we were talking about yesterday about how the Astros and Dodgers are dominating. That's so annoying how they just like, okay, we're going to be them. We're going to sign everyone. We're going to trade for everyone. It's like, you don't need two closers.
Well, I think that's all the time we have here today.
That's a wrap. You got anything else to say, Andy?
Go White Sox. They're better than the Cubs, and they're going to have a better record than the Cubs.
Go Cubs. There's no way that happens.
Yes, there is.
Thank you for watching. The Cubs will be better. Goodbye.
Nope. See ya.
Go Cubs.
Go White Sox.
Go Cubs.
Go White Sox.